At the start of the 2020 pandemic, I heard several CEOs voice their concern over the same thing. Much of the business world had started working remotely. No one had expected it, and certainly no one knew it was going to last as long as it has. And if the buzz is to be believed, remote working might just become a permanent fixture for a lot of people even after the pandemic is over. Since March 2020, we've all adapted to managing remote team members in different ways. Before the COVID outbreak, about 36% of the US workforce had already opted for the gig economy, where there are no bosses or 9-to-5 schedules. Now, even traditional full-time employees are demanding the same flexibility and freedom to work as much or as little as they wish. As a boss, you're wondering, how can we possibly match the same level of productivity as before? Will I be losing control? Will my team slack off without direct supervision? This looks like a zero-sum game in which for one party to win, the other must lose. But it can be turned into a huge win-win for both sides, and you might not need direct supervision at all. Sounds crazy? Let me explain. You may have seen this chart before. Regardless of where or how they work, performance of workers can be roughly divided into these three groups. 20% of the employees are exceptional performers. They live to work. 60% in the middle are solid citizens. Work is important to them, but so is family or their other interests. They live and work. And the remaining 20% do just enough to keep their job. Their main passions in life probably lie elsewhere, and work for them is just a necessity to pay the bills. They work to live. According to the principle, the exceptional top 20% are responsible for roughly 80% of the results. That's what the 80-20 rule says. This is not to say that the remaining 80% of employees are not important. They very much are. For decades, companies all over the world have tried to take this 20-60-20 principle as a metric to be stretched and modified. They've tried to enforce the philosophy of the 20% that live to work on everyone else and convert all their employees to performers at that level. But it hasn't worked. The principle has always prevailed. Why not simply accept reality? Imagine telling your employees that they can choose to work as much or as little as they want, that there will be minimum supervision, and their compensation and rewards will be in line with their own choices. The top 20% will come forward and say they still want to be challenged to the maximum because work is their main priority and will happily reap the extra reward. The 60% in the middle will do great work, but they will independently take some flexibility for themselves. The 20% at the bottom will do just enough to hit their targets, keep their jobs, and pay their bills. Managers now will be able to pay their highest performers much more than the rest, and the rest will not feel cheated because they will be paid according to their own choice, without having to be unfairly and unduly stressed about having to stretch themselves to hit unattainable targets of the live to work 20% for fear of losing their job. 80% of your output was already guaranteed by these 20%. And without the stress, the quality of the others will also improve. So overall productivity should go up, not down. We've heard this before, but it's been especially true for essential workers in the pandemic. The expectations of a vast majority of employees are not working in line with the compensation they are given. On one hand, you have the live-to-work nurse working themselves to the bone to save lives for exactly the same or lower compensation as before. On the other hand, you have the work-to-live essential delivery driver being forced out of a livelihood if they are unable to put their own life at risk just to make ends meet. Let's face it, like it or not, in today's world of remote working, you cannot closely supervise your team even if you wanted to. But hopefully, the idea of minimal supervision is less frightening now. However, for this performance choice board system to work effectively, some key principles are needed. Clearly communicate expectations at each level of performance. If employees are to choose their own output and rewards, make it crystal clear what acceptable performance at the top 20, middle 60, and the bottom 20 looks like. Make your performance goals as objective and as measurable as possible. Those choosing the minimum work-to-live contract must be told clearly that there is still a reasonable minimum expectation and that if their performance falls below that, they will be let go. Make it clear that in case there is a difference of opinion about performance, the manager's word will be final. Ideally, you've communicated the expectations at each level well enough that this doesn't occur in the first place. Be available to support employees who need to ask for help. Minimum supervision does not mean breathing down their necks, but it also does not mean you disappear. Managers still have a role to play, and you will be the most effective when you enable your team to meet their targets. Conduct those one-on-one progress review meetings and be a coach as needed. This system has, of course, become immensely relevant in the remote working landscape that we find ourselves in today, but I've been practicing this system myself as CEO for the last decade. I can vouch that it works in managing employees no matter where or how they work. It puts the power to perform in the hands of your employees through positive incentives, honesty, and trust. This, in turn, gives you the freedom as manager to establish clear goals that you do not have to compromise on. While most managers seek to maximize control, my experience has shown me that freedom produces better results and enables strong, decisive leadership.